The distance was supposed to be sacred, 1,000 miles beyond any battlefield, deep in the Russian heartland where the Ural Mountains begin and the logic of conventional war was thought to end. There, on an airstrip in Chelyabinsk, stood what Vladimir Putin considered untouchable. Not merely an aircraft, a symbol. The physical proof that Russia had clawed its way back to the pinnacle of military engineering, that the Soviet collapse was finally reversed, that the Kremlin could build what only Washington had built before, a fifth-generation fighter meant to dominate the skies of the 21st century. The Su-57, Russia's answer to the F-22 Raptor. The crown jewel of a military-industrial resurrection, Putin has spent 2 decades selling to the world. On April 25, 2026, it burned, not in combat over Ukraine, not in a training accident, but on the tarmac at Shagol airfield over 1,700 kilometers from the nearest Ukrainian border, reduced to a charred husk by a strike that should have been impossible. Satellite images do not lie. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed it with the calm of a weather report. Several Su-57 fighters, one Su-34 fighter bomber, destroyed. This is not an isolated tactical success. It is the moment when a foundational assumption of this war, that Russia possesses a sanctuary beyond Ukraine's reach, was obliterated along with the aircraft it was meant to protect. The psychological perimeter of the Russian state has been breached. The concept of strategic depth, on which Russian military doctrine has relied since the Second World War, has collapsed. And the weapon that burned on that tarmac was far more than metal and fuel. It was a narrative, a myth, a lie that Russia has told itself and tried to sell to the world, now exposed in the most humiliating way imaginable. To understand why this strike reverberates far beyond Chelyabinsk, you must understand what the Su-57 represents in the architecture of Putin's Russia. It is not simply a combat aircraft. It is the material argument for Russian greatness in an era when that greatness has been challenged on every front. While the Black Sea Fleet projects power, while the Kerch Bridge binds occupied territory to the mainland, the Su-57 was supposed to prove that Russia could compete with the United States in the most technologically demanding domain of modern warfare, the invisible war of stealth, sensor fusion, and air dominance. Russia's United Aircraft Corporation promised a fighter that could strike air, ground, and sea targets in any weather, day or night. A supercruising, missile-laden Predator carrying 10,000 kilograms of munitions at speeds exceeding Mach 2, shaped with low observable geometry and armed with weapons designed to outclass anything in NATO's arsenal. Army recognition notes its capacity for R-77NM and R-74M2 missiles, tactical cruise missiles, anti-ship weapons, and the same guided bomb families Russia has used to terrorize Ukrainian cities. The first batch arrived in 2020, after a maiden flight a decade earlier. For years, the Su-57 has been paraded at air shows, featured in state media, and held up as evidence that the Russian aerospace industry had not merely survived the post-Soviet collapse, but had transcended it. That was the story Putin needed the world to believe, and the story he needed his own military to believe. But stories are fragile things. This one was already cracking before the first flames rose over Shagol. The conventional assumption about Russia's fifth-generation fighter program follows the narrative Moscow has carefully constructed, an advanced stealth platform, a peer to the F-22 and F-35. That assumption has been repeated in defense journals, whispered in procurement offices from New Delhi to Beijing, and used to justify enormous military budgets inside Russia itself. Analysts who have tracked this program with clear eyes have long rejected that picture. Their framework is built around a single core insight. You do not need to shoot down a myth in aerial combat. You need to expose it, degrade it, reveal the gap between propaganda and engineering reality until the market for the myth collapses from within. The evidence of that collapse has been accumulating for years, hidden in plain sight. India provided the first major warning. For over a decade, New Delhi partnered with Moscow to develop what would become the Su-57, investing billions in an 11-year joint venture. By 2018, India withdrew. The reasons were stark. The aircraft lacked the stealth capabilities India required. Technology transfers were delayed and contested. Costs spiraled without commensurate capability gains. The platform simply did not meet the standards necessary to compete with American stealth fighters. Russia completed the program alone, but the damage was done. A prospective buyer representing one of the world's largest defense markets had examined the Su-57 up close, evaluated its radar cross-section, its engine reliability, its avionics integration, and walked away. By March 2026, even Russia's offers of a new engine and an unlicensed production variant could not bring India back. New Delhi chose to invest in its own AMCA program and European sixth-generation projects, the Tempest and FCAS initiatives, spearheaded by Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, and France. The customer Russia needed most had judged the product unworthy and aligned itself with the Western technological ecosystem Putin's military-industrial complex was supposed to rival. The technical assessments that followed confirmed India's verdict. The Su-57's radar cross-section, according to analyses cited by the Aviation Geek Club, is between 1,000 and 10,000 times larger than that of America's F-22 and F-35. Radars detect it at 6 to 10 times the range of a true stealth platform. Its engines are old, unreliable, and prone to maintenance cycles that render an expensive fleet operationally fragile. In essence, military analysts have concluded the Su-57 is not a fifth-generation fighter. It is a 4.5-generation aircraft wearing the costume of something more advanced, fulfilling a role already occupied by Russia's own Su-35 at a fraction of the cost. Russia has built fewer than 30 of them, and now there is at least one fewer that will ever take to the skies. But what makes the Shagol strike strategically devastating rather than merely embarrassing is this. Putin knew. He knew the Su-57 was not what it was claimed to be. That is precisely why he hid it. After Ukraine's first recorded strike against a Su-57 at Chelyabinsk airfield in June 2024, just 460 kilometers from the border, Putin did not deploy his precious jets to dominate Ukrainian airspace. He did not use them to suppress enemy air defenses or strike critical infrastructure. He moved them 3.5 times further away, to Chelyabinsk, to a region closer to Kazakhstan than to Ukraine, to an airfield where distance itself was supposed to be the defense. That decision speaks louder than any press release. A confident Air Force does not hide its premier fighter from an enemy that lacks a comparable air superiority platform. A confident leader does not cower his crown jewel on a remote airstrip, praying that geography alone will protect it. Putin's relocation of the Su-57 was not a tactical adjustment. It was an admission of fear. Fear that the jet could not survive contact with Ukrainian defenses. Fear that losing even one would unravel the narrative he had spent years constructing. Fear that the world would see what he already knew, that the Su-57 could not do the job it was designed to do, and that Russia could not afford to lose the few it possessed. Ukraine called that bluff, and in doing so, executed a strike that operates on 3 distinct dimensions simultaneously. The first dimension is distance. The Shagol strike did not merely destroy aircraft. It destroyed the concept of strategic depth as Russia understood it. For 3 years, Moscow has operated under the assumption that its rear areas, hundreds, even thousands of kilometers from the front, were immune from precision attack. Factories, command posts, training centers, and precious hardware could be sheltered in the vastness of Russian territory, protected not by air defense networks, but by sheer geography. That assumption is now ash on a Chelyabinsk tarmac. Whether the weapon was the Flamingo hybrid drone missile system, with its 3,000-kilometer range and 1,000-kilogram warhead proven accurate at 1,400 kilometers by March 2026, or a network of saboteurs operating inside Russia itself, or some capability Ukraine has not yet revealed, the message is identical. Nowhere is safe. The sanctuary is gone. If Chelyabinsk is within reach, then every airfield, every defense plant, every command bunker in European Russia is within reach. The psychological impact on Russian military planning is incalculable. The second dimension is the aircraft itself. By striking the Su-57 where it hid, Ukraine did not just remove a platform from Putin's order of battle. It exposed the psychological architecture of Russian military planning. The Su-57 was not deployed because it was too valuable to risk. It was hidden because it was too fragile to lose, and its destruction and hiding proves that Putin's fears were justified, not because the jet was worth protecting, but because Russia is incapable of protecting anything it values. If the Su-57 were everything Russia claims, it would be dominating the skies over Ukraine, striking HIMARS launchers, suppressing air defenses, changing the character of the war. Instead, it was parked in the open, over 1,000 miles from the enemy, waiting to be burned. That is not the behavior of a great power. That is the behavior of a regime clinging to an illusion while knowing, in its private calculations, that the illusion cannot survive contact with reality. The third dimension is the method. Ukraine has not confirmed how this strike was executed. The General Staff attributed it to the unmanned systems forces, but offered no details on the weapon system. This ambiguity is itself a weapon. If it was the Flamingo, then Russia's air defense network, already proven inadequate around Moscow and repeatedly embarrassed over Belgorod and Kursk, cannot protect even its most remote strategic assets. The satellite images from Shagol show burned airframes, but no massive impact craters, which raises questions about the warhead type, but does not change the outcome. If it was sabotage by partisan or intelligence operatives, as seen in December 2025 at Lipetsk airfield, where Ukrainian-backed partisans destroyed 2 Su-30s, then Russia's internal security apparatus has been penetrated to a depth that should terrify every commander in the Russian military. A network that can reach Chelyabinsk, can reach Novosibirsk, it can reach anywhere. If it was a new undisclosed capability, then Russia is facing an adversary whose technological evolution has outpaced its intelligence assessments. In any scenario, Russia loses. In every scenario, Ukraine wins. The implications ripple outward with startling speed. Consider what this strike means for the global arms market. Russia has marketed the Su-57 as an export platform, a cheaper alternative to American stealth fighters. But no serious defense procurement officer can now look at the Su-57 without seeing Shagol. They will see an aircraft that its own operator was too frightened to deploy in combat. They will see a platform that could not be protected, even when hidden 1,700 kilometers from the front, in the heart of Russian territory. They will see satellite imagery of a burned-out fifth-generation fighter that never flew a combat mission against the enemy that destroyed it. The export potential of the Su-57 program did not merely suffer a setback. It suffered an autopsy. The billions spent on development, the parades, the air show performances, all of it now reads as theater for a product that cannot survive the real world. Inside Russia, the damage is equally severe, though of a different nature. Putin's domestic legitimacy rests on a compact with the Russian people, that he has restored their nation's status as a great power, that the military he has built can protect them and project strength, that the sacrifices of the war are justified by the superiority of Russian arms. The Su-57 was the physical manifestation of that compact. It was the proof, and it has just been incinerated by an enemy that Moscow claims to be subjugating. The humiliation operates on two levels, both fatal to the regime's narrative. If the Su-57 truly was a world-class fighter, then Russian incompetence has been exposed on a scale that defies excuse. A fifth-generation stealth platform, parked in the open, unprotected, over 1,000 miles from danger, destroyed by a drone or a saboteur, this is not the mistake of a junior officer. This is the systemic failure of a military culture that cannot secure its most sacred assets. Alternatively, if the Su-57 was never what Russia claimed, then Putin has been exposed as a fraud who spent billions on a boondoggle while hiding the truth from his own people and his potential allies. Neither scenario allows Putin to claim strength. Both scenarios invite the question that authoritarian regimes fear most. What else are they lying about? The strike also carries immediate operational significance for the war. Alongside the Su-57, Ukraine destroyed a Su-34 fighter bomber, a platform far more active in Russia's war effort than the hidden Su-57. The Su-34 has been Russia's primary delivery vehicle for the UMPK and UMPB guided bombs that have devastated Ukrainian cities and defensive positions from standoff ranges behind the front lines. Every Su-34 lost is a direct reduction in Russia's capacity to terrorize Ukrainian population centers. But the loss of the Su-57, while numerically smaller, is qualitatively greater. It removes from Putin's arsenal the psychological weapon he needed most, the threat of eventual technological escalation. Russia can no longer dangle the possibility that its fifth-generation fleet will eventually enter the war and change the air balance. That fleet is now proven vulnerable before it ever proved capable. The threat is gone. The mystery is solved. The emperor has no clothes. Then there's the question of what comes next. Ukraine's campaign against Russian strategic depth has been accelerating throughout 2026. Oil refineries burn with regularity. Airfields have been struck. Command posts have been hit. The network of long-range drones and hybrid systems now operating against Russian territory has transformed the war from a conflict along a front line into a war without a rear area. The Shagol strike is not an anomaly. It is the new standard. If Ukraine can reach Chelyabinsk, it can reach anywhere. The Flamingo's 3,000-kilometer range covers the entirety of European Russia. If partisan networks were involved, then no base, no depot, no training facility is secure. Every aircraft moved further east is an aircraft removed from the war. Every commander who looks at a map and searches for safety will find that the concept no longer exists. Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges has argued since 2022 that Crimea can be isolated and reclaimed through logistics warfare, emphasizing that modern campaigns against cumbersome, doctrine-bound militaries are won by making the enemy's strategic positions untenable. The same logic applies here. Russia's aerospace industry is not nimble. It cannot quickly replace a Su-57, with unit costs estimated between $100 million and $120 million per airframe, and a production line that has delivered fewer than 30 aircraft across half a decade. Each loss is functionally irreplaceable. The strike at Shagol does not just subtract one aircraft from an order of battle. It multiplies the fear that now protects every remaining asset. Russia must now choose: hide its best equipment so far from the war that it becomes strategically irrelevant, or risk it within range of an enemy that has proven it can strike anywhere, with precision and without warning. This is the siege logic of the new warfare Ukraine is pioneering. Not the frontal assault of 20th century doctrine, but the patient, precise dismantling of the enemy's capacity to believe in his own security. The Su-57 was not defeated in aerial combat. It was defeated by the strategic campaign that made its hiding place irrelevant. And in that defeat lies a message that extends far beyond this war. Territory seized by force can be reclaimed, as the Crimea campaign demonstrates. But myths are harder to kill than tanks. They require a different kind of warfare, one that targets not just the physical object, but the story built around it. Ukraine has done both. It has destroyed the aircraft, and it has destroyed the illusion. The Su-57 is no longer the future of Russian air power. It is the past. A failed project, a frightened deployment, a burning wreck on a distant tarmac, exposed by an enemy that Moscow still refuses to acknowledge as its equal. Putin thought distance would protect him. He thought hiding would save his crown jewel. He was wrong, and whether the next strike comes from a flamingo descending from the clouds, a partisan emerging from the shadows, or a capability Ukraine has not yet revealed, the result will be the same. The sanctuary is gone. The myth is dead. And Russia's most advanced fighter jet has proven, in its final moments on a Chelyabinsk airstrip, to be exactly what its critics claimed. Too expensive to lose, too flawed to use, and too visible to hide. The skies over Shagol are quiet now, but the echo of that explosion will be heard in every defense ministry, every procurement office, and every Kremlin strategy session for years to come. Do not look away.